Hey, everybody, it's Hank. Hey, I don't know about you. There's been a lot of space created for reflection, for looking at the math, looking at what you thought were your priorities, what you weren't, I've been reflecting on a few things because what I realize is I've had some challenges lately of people who aren't in close proximity, probably seeing me maybe through a lens that wouldn't be accurate through the lens that I have. And so I was reflecting on that, and what I realized is sometimes we're playing different games, or we're seeing the game from a different perspective. So for example, a referee sees the game from a different perspective than the coach sees it from a different perspective than the player, and the player sees it from a different perspective than maybe the parents in the crowd. And I believe that everybody should be given the chance to see the game through their own perspective. And I'm very comfortable with the game that I'm playing in what we call life. And one of the major advancements that I made was fear versus faith. And oftentimes what we do is we find ourselves attached to things, whether it be attached to relationships or stuff or outcomes. And somewhere along the line, I got an awareness in one of the models that I've been leaning on quite a bit is an unconscious awareness or an unconscious incompetence. And oftentimes what I see in people is a lot of people have an unconscious incompetence. Like they're not even aware that their breath stinks. And once they get awareness, now they're in a conscious incompetence. And most people can go figure out how to fix their breath if they choose to. Some people are perfectly okay with it and say, well, just don't come in my bubble. And so many times what we do is we impose what we think other people should be doing, yet they might be playing a game where part of their game is they want to have stinky breath just to keep people away. Part of the game that I play is I create boundaries because I've allowed my boundaries to get too low sometimes, and it's allowed people too much proximity. If you have too many people in your ear, too many relationships, it waters it down. And sometimes people don't understand the game that I'm playing, and rightfully so. So fear versus faith. We're going to talk specifically towards revenue share. 10 years ago, when Charlie had open heart surgery, it was at that moment that I realized what I thought was a business was more like a job, meaning if I stopped showing up, the revenue stopped coming in. Not only that, it was somewhat naive of me where if I stopped showing up, my clients were taken care of either. And that's not okay. And so 10 years ago, I made the decision that I'd never be in a position again where if life changed, where if I got punched in the jaw, or if circumstances changed, I had all my everything in one basket, or I didn't have different controls that I could turn up the volume on. I made that decision, and along that path, I've gone backwards, I've gone forwards, I've actually put the arrow on and it's fallen off. And there's been a lot of lessons there. And there was a point last year where Glenn Sanford, by the way, is one of the most generous people that I've ever met. He's one that his actions have spoken louder than his words. And with the revenue share model, I mean, he had ideas of where it was going to go, but he had no idea that what would transform actually did. And there were some adjustments made because the model was such that he was overpaying us. Now, think about this. If you overpaid someone, you'd ask for the money back. Glenn didn't do that. Glenn wanted to err on the side of making sure that agents were taken care of. And one of our core values is agile. And once he realized that there were some changes that needed to be made, he made them, yet didn't go back. Now, stick with me on this. There's a point where unconsciously I realized that I had a fear of losing rev share, meaning rev share is a significant portion of our income and our wealth building and the hours that we say yes to in relationships. And if there's one thing that I've learned looking back is anytime I start playing not to lose, that's where I get in trouble. See, and so anytime I have a feeling that I choose not to have, and around this, it was fear and the fear of losing something, in this case, losing rev share, that's not a good energy to be in because you start to make different decisions when you're coming from a fear of loss. So if we go to T. Harv Eckert's point FAR, programming leads to thoughts, thoughts leads to feelings, feelings leads to actions, actions lead to results, which through the program Bold, I was made aware of that T. Harv Eckert brought us that formula. Whenever I have a feeling that I choose not to have, I go and I interrogate my thoughts, because it's much easier to challenge your thoughts than it is your feelings. And I believe when you go from your feelings into action, that's a reaction. When you go from your feelings and you go back to your thoughts, make sure those thoughts are true and accurate to what you believe, and you go back to your feelings, that's your response. So I do my best not to react anymore in life. In fact, I want to respond to everything. So when we look at this, once I get a conscious incompetence around the fact that I had a fear of losing it, I went to my thoughts. I'm like, heck, is there anything that you do that would cause you to lose rev share? Are you driving 85 in a school zone? Are you out there doing reckless things? Well, no, I'm not. And one thing I love about our leadership is they come from a position of power versus force. Unless you're driving 85 in a school zone or you're driving drunk, they first will educate. And what I love is I've seen the examples, sometimes to my frustration, I've seen the examples of first coming to educate. Then from there, once you've educated someone, because some people have an unconscious incompetence, and what I feel is most people are usually pretty good people. And once they get a conscious awareness of what they're doing, they'll usually fix it. So power versus force, power, faith versus fear. Like our leadership is showing that they have faith that people, if they know what we know, they'll usually make different decisions. So educate first. Next one is warn. Hey, you know what? We've warned you. And I've experienced this. I've had a post where they've said, hey, Hank, this doesn't really fall in alignment. Could you take it down? And once I got awareness, you know what I did? I took it down. Hey, anything I didn't need to do to make this right? Because I responded. I didn't react. I didn't need to be right. It was brought to my attention that I was wrong. So I just took it down and we moved forward. And now I have an education and a basis to move from. And so my fear around losing rev share was unfounded. Now, let's say that it did happen, where something happened where I was asked to leave. And by the way, I've never been fired from a company. I mean, even when I was a younger kid, there was one job that I had that I knew I needed to be fired. So I stepped down because I wasn't getting the job done. Yet in the 42 years that I've been working or on this earth, I've never been fired because I believe I have emotional intelligence where once I get awareness around something, I make adjustments. So back to the rev share, I said, well, what if it does happen? And I can't share numbers because we're publicly traded and all of that. Yet I asked myself, if I took the time, energy, and effort to go build a membership at $100 a month, could I replicate that? And would it take some time? Absolutely. Would the arrow be drawn backwards? Absolutely. Would we have a cash flow change for a season or two? Absolutely. So many of us, what we have is we don't have an income problem yet. We have allowed our lifestyles to go to a point where we have cash flow problems more than what we would like. So what I realized that I can't out earn stupid. I've tried. 5 years ago, I leaned into numbers. I got tired of trying to out earn stupid. And what I've realized with everything going on is I have a conscious incompetence when it comes to everything going on in the world. So I'm deciding to lean in, and I'd like to share a book. And if any of you are interested, I'm looking to educate myself at another level. And one of my coaches shared this book with me. It's called White Fragility. So it's my intent is once a month, I'm going to educate myself around everything that's going on in the world, because for me to only look through it through my lens as a white male of 42 years old, I believe there's a lot of perspective in views that could help me if I had a better understanding of them. So I digressed. And I got to asking myself, okay, I don't have an income problem. I've always been able to make enough money to take care of my family. I've had cash flow problems. So what does it take? What decisions do I need to change in order to not have to worry about cash flow at the level I have most of my life? And that's where it gave me power and faith back, where one, it wasn't logical for me to be worried about rev share be taken away because I'm not someone who does stuff like that. And I've made enough deposits that shows where my true heart is. And I truly believe if I ever make a mistake, it won't be one that's huge. It'll be one where a withdrawal will be taken from the accounts. And yet there's been enough deposits where we'll be okay moving forward. So once I got out of fear, I started doing the math and I said, okay, if we had to start over from scratch, and I've done that a couple times. I did it when I left my old company and had the non-compete. I did it when I went and I became a coach. I left my database of selling real estate. I have a history of starting over and having success. So I said, okay, knowing what I know now, I could probably replace that income within a 12 months time again. See, when we no longer come from fear and we have faith, when we have certainty in Maslow's needs, some of you saw my post, and what I realized is, and again, I'm open to looking at this differently. I'm moving from level 4 into level 5. I used to need a lot more acceptance. I used to need a lot more people liking me and status and all of that stuff. And I think I've moved beyond that. We're moving to significance and making an impact and legacy and the bigger picture and the ripple effect. And that's where choices are made from. And so I asked myself the question, could I go get, and I think currently I have 536 agents net in my EXP organization. So when you look at that, I asked myself, could I go get 536 people that I add value to in a different model, like a membership? And this is where I kind of got excited. And I thought to myself, could I deliver $96 a month worth of value if that was my number one focus, if for the next year I decided to lean into that? And my answer was yes. See, the math works in it. And if I can find someone to do the tattoo, I'm going to do a tattoo that says math versus drama. See, what it is a math equation. Now that I don't have a cash flow challenge, I have enough runaway where if rev share did go away, maybe it's because the whole real estate industry shifts and it's no longer what it is. Like, it's okay, because when you focus on the micro, you don't have to worry about the macro, because the macro you really don't have any control over. The fear that I had about losing rev share was fear out of something that I really don't have control over. So why give it energy? So what I did was I worked through, if that happened, what would I do? And the reality is it would be okay. Would the arrow be drawn back? Absolutely. Would some relationships change? Absolutely. Would the comfort that I have with that rev share income change? Yeah. And it's okay, because here's the reality. When I started doing the math, and I was like, wow, if I went and got just 100 people over the next 12 months, and let's think about that math. If we're doing 50, 25, we're going to have 18,000 connections over the next 12 months. And if it was all geared towards the membership, that's 18,000 connections. 20 of them would be an exchange of energy. And I'm not neutral. Like, I'm very secure with who I am, and people either like me or not like me. No one's neutral when we have an interaction, because I don't tiptoe around. And some people don't like that. Some people love it because they'll know exactly where I stand. I don't need to be right. I want to know if I'm wrong. I also don't need to take a whole lot of time to dance around things, because I don't want to cause harm to anyone. I also don't need to take 5 minutes to do something that can be done in 30 seconds, because there's a compound effect of that. So stick with me here. I did the math and I said, if I had 12 months, I could absolutely go get 100 people. So 100 people times $100 is $10,000 a month. All of you have the ability to go add enough value into another human being where they would exchange $100 a month. That's $10,000 a month. Some of you are finding yourself right now in a position where the income that you knew at, that safe, stable income that you thought you had, it's all been changed. And when we start to understand math, and we start to understand, like, if we can just survive long enough for it to take root, and I asked myself, could I get 100 people over the course of the next 12 months to pay me $100 to add value into them? And my answer was absolutely. Now let's think about that. In the first year, if it's 100 people, those 100 people could easily turn into 500 people. And I've proven that with EXP. I've documented every single hour that I've worked specifically on EXP since January 1st or March 1st, 2016. And it's averaged out about 3 hours specifically on EXP. We have 536 people net. We've had 787, I believe, gross during that time. So, like, I know my numbers. Now let's think about the difference of this. And this is why I don't come from fear. If this was a cash flow that I now owned and controlled, at $100 a month with 535 people in it. That's over $50,000 a month in cash flow that I now own and control. And then if I chose to, I could sell. So those of you that understand business, are there businesses out there that on their profit and loss, their balance sheet need cash flow? So $50,000 a month in cash flow could be pretty attractive, especially when they're going to the banks and they're looking to get financing. They might have assets, but if you don't have cash flow, assets don't do you really any good if you don't have cash flow. So they'd be willing to give up some of their assets in order for that cash flow. And it got me thinking, oh my gosh, sometimes when we're in fear of loss, it's stopping us from going to something bigger because we're afraid to go from good to great. Now, don't read this as if I'm looking to blow up my rep shirt, because I'm not. I love the company. I love the leadership. And as long as I do, I'll be here. Now, with that, when I started to think and I started coming from possibilities, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, if I focus on just this one thing, I could bring it to $50,000 a month in cash flow. Now, when we look at that, that's $600,000 a year out of cash flow. And depending on the business brokerage that you're talking to, you're easily talking 2, 3, 4 times that income for a cash out, especially if you're willing to take equity and everything else. Now, here's another point that was pointed out to me. Hank, sometimes you talk so fast and with everything that's going through your mind, you lose people because you're thinking at a different level. Now, I don't say that to say that I'm smarter than anyone, because I'm not. I barely graduated high school, C average, yet I don't overthink things. So I tend to get into action faster, and I get to believe things if I have evidence and I can triangulate that things work. I just assume that it's going to work until I get into action. I find out differently. So when I look at this, and if you're playing a different game, you're no longer playing the short-term game, and you know that even today's loss might be tomorrow's victory, and you're true to yourself, you stop worrying about what everybody else thinks. You stop worrying about if your direct questions are going to make people uncomfortable. What I find is if I can ask direct, specific questions, they usually make people feel uncomfortable. Yet when they know where I'm coming from, we usually get to where we need to faster, and we have more progress. And that's what I'm about. I'm about progress. I don't need to win every game. And sometimes, you know what? I'll ask a question. I'll find out that I was wrong. I'll say something and find out that I was wrong. And then I move forward because I don't need to be right. Just like, and I'm almost ashamed to say this, I would say it was until, 17 or 18 years old that I was a racist. I didn't know what I didn't know. And then I met, friends. Like I played junior hockey with Justin Benjamin, and I went to a leadership camp, and I got exposed to more nationalities and more races. And before growing up, I was a racist, yet I was able to change who I am. See, it's okay to change who you are. I'm disappointed in myself that at one point in my life, I thought a certain way. And yet, I don't think that way anymore. And my actions show that you can change, and you don't need to hang on to that because that feedback loop is closed. So faith versus fear, where in your life are you attached to things? And when you're attached to something being a certain way, you're destined to show up differently. You're destined to bring a different energy to it. Another example is my marriage. I mean, be honest with you, there was many years where I was attached to being married. I was attached to what it would look like if we got a divorce. I was attached to what the feedback would be from my peers and everything else. And through therapy and through working with my wife on staying married and having not just an average marriage, I gave up that attachment of just being married. I wanted not just a good relationship with my wife, I wanted a great relationship with my wife. And I was willing to put in the work to get to where we are today. Now, do we have a perfect marriage? Anything from it. Do we have our fights? Absolutely. Do I love where we are and the foundation that we have in order to have a great life together moving forward for the rest of our life? Absolutely. I will bet more now. I mean, whatever, we're having our 15-year anniversary. I'll bet more now on the fact that we'll be seeing our 50th anniversary than I would have at year 5 or year 10. And why do I share this with you? If I would have came from fear of losing my wife, I would have shown up differently. See, I don't have fear about losing her, because if I'm true to myself and I show up and I meet her at the line, I'm willing to put in the work, there's a good chance, knowing my wife, she's a completely rational human being. She's willing to actually look at it from my seats in the stands. We can agree to disagree. We can move forward. We can have conflict with resolution. And when I look at a partner, I don't know that I could have picked a better partner to do life with. Now, when we look at this, fear is hurting so many people right now. The fear of the unknown. And where are you so afraid that it's causing you to act differently, where it's almost imprisoning you in and of itself? And the reality is, all of us have our time to meet our maker. And many will know, like, I have probably different views on religion than most, but I do believe that I'm built on a very solid foundation. And I believe that when it's my time to go meet my maker, my God, it'll be the time. And I'm in a lot less control than what I think. And all I can do is control the micro, knowing that I'm not guaranteed the macro. And maybe I have an unfair advantage with the things that I've gone through in life, whether it's the bankruptcy or going from a company that I had huge significance in to being in a non-compete, or maybe it's my son going through open heart surgery. I've had a lot of stuff that I've gone through in life. And to be fair, I have the unfair advantage of coaching phenomenal people. I mean, talk about what an unfair advantage that I have is the people that entrust me with helping guide them to make their decisions. I get that collective unconscious, and I get to triangulate what works, what doesn't work. And I get to see patterns at an accelerated rate, not only from a book standpoint, yet from an experimental standpoint with real human beings. I mean, the stuff that I've heard from human beings, do me a favor, open up a little bit more, be a little bit more vulnerable. And I think what you'll find is people have been through a lot more stuff than you could ever imagine. The stuff that I hear people have gone through, it would blow your mind away. And when you start having levels of conversations like that, it starts to completely change the trajectory of where you are and where you're going. And it helps give you a completely different perspective. And I love this saying, people are doing the best that they can for what they know. All of my suffering is my judgment of them. And what I find is most human beings are good human beings. And when somebody acts out of line or does something that I wouldn't do in that same situation, I ask myself, what causes them that this is the best way that they're showing up? I use the example of last summer, we had the opportunity to have two young kids break into our lake house. I left at 12 o'clock. I came back at 2, and I saw that the nest thing on our door was broken. And I just made note. It was something small that just was out of line. And I thought, maybe, we had coaches in last time. Maybe somebody took it off and just didn't replace it, and I didn't notice. Then we went down to the boat, and I saw the fish finder was gone, and the whole family was in the boat. And I said, hold on a second. So he goes, what's going on? You got a funny look. I said, I think we've gotten broken into. She goes, what? So I walked up and I saw that my chainsaw had been taken, a few other things. And I came back to the boat, and she goes, well, what are we doing? I said, well, we were broken into. However, we're going on the lake. See, just because this happened doesn't mean that I'm going to all of a sudden allow the compounding effect of their choices. And I thought to myself, how lucky am I? I have a lake house where I had the opportunity where someone, their best choice today was to go steal. Now, I've never been in a place where that was the best option that I had for the day, was to go take something from somebody else. And I thought, man, oh man, how fortunate am I that I'm on this side of the coin? And then I got a lot of feedback from people, and I'm careful on who I take feedback from. A lot of it was, go get them, roast them, go to pawn shops, go do this, go chase them down. At the end of the day, it was about $1,500 worth of stuff. It was much easier for me to go create another $1,500 in my world than to go take the time, energy, and effort that it would be to make someone wrong. That if I knew their situation, I'd probably have a lot of empathy on where they were at and where their world was, where the last thing that I need to do is create more problems for them. And thankfully, my neighbor had a video, and we were able to put it on social media, and we were able to work with the authorities, and I pressed charges. And I pressed charges under the understanding that if they turned 18 and went down the right path, that it wouldn't be on their permanent record, and that it would be just an arrow drawn back. See, the reality is those kids didn't have the best scenario to win in life. And all they needed was they needed a life moment to give them a fork in the road where now they had a choice. See, I don't want to ruin them. I wanted to help bring an awareness that if they keep going down this path, they're going to end up in trouble. Yet they can choose to go down this path, and now they have a little bit more pain, a little bit more consequence around it. And see, here's the challenge that I think people have is they don't do the math on what the real consequences are. So for example, I know if I choose to follow my schedule, I know if I choose to follow my standards and my principles and say, screw my feelings, I know what that does for my family and for my business. Therefore, when it comes to having someone else's agenda come on me and someone else to project on me that I should be doing it another way, there aren't too many people that I trade places with. There's just not. And so some people think that I'm hardcore, and I'd argue that I'm not hardcore. I'm just real clear on where I'm at, where I'm going, where I have, where I give power to. The opinion of my wife matters. The opinion of my kids matter. The opinion of my one-on-one coaching clients or my family, but to what extent? In my 42 years on life, the reality is I've been the one constant. As long as I'm good with who I am and what I stand for, even if in a snapshot, I don't show up the way that being perceived, or maybe in a snapshot of my life, I show up less than, it's okay because I know that I'm the one constant. As long as I can lay my head down, knowing what my intentions were, knowing who I am as a human being, knowing what I'm willing to do, what I'm not willing to do, as long as I'm okay, like right with me, your opinion is of no like effect on me because you're doing the best that you can for what you understand through your lens. Now, again, it's just a different level of awareness. It's a different level of game, knowing that I'm playing the infinite game and it's not just a finite game. So if there's a time where we go backwards, where the arrow goes backwards, I know that today's loss might be tomorrow's victory, and it's part of going through life. See, at some point we've gotten into this thought process that sometimes life is just going to suck. Like I think we've been lured into that life is always supposed to be easy, and life is not going to have its challenges. Yet the reality is a lot of life's just going to be freaking tough. And there's a great book called Relentless by Tim Grover. And I think for a lot of my life, I used to try to justify my actions and felt that everything that I did was going to be great for everybody. And I use the example, a great mentor of mine, Diana Kokoska, huge impact on my life. And we're no longer in relationship. And I get that. The decisions that I made impacted her and it impacted her world. And I don't romanticize that my decisions that I felt was best, I need to feel good about. Like from her perspective, it impacted her. And I wasn't a romantic that my actions didn't impact her. And I wasn't a romantic that a relationship would ever be the same. In the book, Relentless, Tim Grover talks about a cleaner. A cleaner can make a decision when a decision needs to be made, knowing that your decision may negatively impact people that you truly care about. And I truly care about Diana. I hope that she's doing well. I think that she's probably done more for our industry, for our world, and her little pinky than I've done in my whole essence. And I can only hope to have the impact that she's had. And we're no longer in relationships. See, some relationships aren't going to be able to survive decisions that you make that are best for you because they might not be best for them. I believe we're all running a different race in a different game. And the reality is the relationships you have today are going to be different 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 30 years from now. So where am I going with all this? Do yourself a favor. Stop living a life of fear. Get real clear on your micro. Get real clear on where you might be incompetent. Get real clear that it's a journey, a process, not just a destination. And if you get awareness that you dumb screwed up, fix it. Like, I don't know about you. I've done some stupid things, and knowing what I know now, I do it differently. And here's one reason I believe that we've been able to have this success is when I go and do something, I get into action and I get a result that I don't like, I adjust. In the book, The Road Less Stupid, it talks about it's a good idea until it's not. Meaning sometimes what we do is, and so for example, I signed up for a coaching program, spent $14,000, and it's fallen very short of what I thought it was going to be. And I didn't schedule my one-on-one call for last month. And I realized that I wasn't scheduling the call because I no longer saw value in it. And so I reached out to my coach and I said, hey, I'm not scheduling a call. I believe I had the wrong expectations, and I don't see value in moving forward because I'm not looking to emulate what I'm experiencing. Therefore, I'm just going to move forward. Now think about that. It was my fault. I saw what I wanted to see, and I thought that I was going to help decrease a gap that I had, and I didn't ask enough questions. Now, through sharing that with my coach, the reality was some things have changed since I signed up, and I wasn't that far off, and my expectations versus what was delivered, there was some incongruency, and now we're at a meeting of minds. It doesn't make them wrong. It doesn't make me wrong. Yet now we have a basis to see if we can fix this moving forward or just move on. And it was a good idea until it wasn't. Sunk cost bias. So many of us hang on to, I spent $14,000. God, I feel cheated. No, like, what good does that do? Like, what good does it do to spend all that money and be angry and everything else? And what if you just look at that as stupid tax that you paid and you move forward and you ask more questions, or you look at, hey, what did I ignore that I should have known in order to not make that decision? See, once we take responsibility that we could have made different choices on the micro level, then what that does is that gives us power. See, and I shouldn't spend that $14,000 if it hits my net worth so much that it makes a huge difference. $14,000 of my net worth over the next span of 5, 10, 15 years doesn't really make that big of an impact. Yet so many of us don't know our numbers. Therefore, all we do is we focus on the short-term losses and we aren't looking at the long-term gains. I guarantee I've probably learned more from this coaching program of what I don't want. And oftentimes what we don't want is actually more powerful than what we do want. For example, with everything going on in our world right now, I'm in a position where we can maintain. We can not have to go big. Like, we've put ourselves in a position where we've put some cash in hand. We've lessened our liabilities. We don't have to go work 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, because right now in this environment, I think the risk of getting it wrong is pretty big. And when you can have patience, as Dave Ramsey says, when you have some reserves, you don't have to panic. And the most people that have had cash on hand, the most people that aren't broke, have the ability to not panic when the storm comes. We're in a storm. And you'll get through the storm and you'll be a better sailor on the other side. Yet, if you don't have the right resources, you're in trouble. So if you're in that spot where you don't have the right resources, where you've had to go back into security and all of that, have this be the last time you get there. Have this be the last freaking time you're ever going to be in a position where you're attached to an outcome or things remaining the same. See, I'm not a romantic. I love rev share. I also know if the right leadership wasn't in place, I'm not going to stay at a company that I don't love or I don't have the same values as the leadership just because I'm making money. I'm not a whore. And so I focus on the micro, putting myself in positions where if things do change, it was a good idea until it wasn't. I can tell you right now, I would completely walk away from the income stream if the values of the company weren't in alignment with what the values are for me. I love the stance that Glenn stepped forward and made his stance that he has with equal rights and Black Lives Matter and everything that we're at. And if he didn't, and if he had the opposite, I'm not going to take that money. Like, it's faith versus fear. It's abundance versus scarcity. And where in your life are you showing up that you're coming from fear, hanging on to what you know? Sometimes you have to let go of that fear. Just knowing, Steve Harvey has a great video that sometimes you just got to jump. Even if you don't know if that parachute's going to appear, you got to have faith. And, oftentimes I'm challenged because of my potty mouth and challenged. And the reality is oftentimes I have a lot more faith than most. Now, again, we all have times where we might have indecision or fear, and we move into faith, and I get it, I do too. But the reality is how much faith do you have? And sometimes we need something like a 2020 to give us perspective to slow things down. I mean, I look at my life with my family was slowing down, and the great day that I had with my daughter yesterday where she was asking me to do things. And again, I don't claim to be a natural at being a father to a 6-year-old and putting myself in that world. And yesterday I was like, huh, it's pretty good. So wow, this is we've been on here for a while, and if you've stuck around, thank you. A lot of these videos are journal entries for me moving forward, so that I can reflect on what I believe to be true today, and what ends up being my truth a year from now, and 2 years from now, and 3 years from now, or we're seeing, maybe what I didn't see coming. I believe that I'm an early adapter. I have lots of evidence of that where sometimes I make choices, sometimes I go in directions, and it's because of my subconscious. And I look backwards and I think, wow, that was pretty brilliant. And the reality is we live our life by default. And the question is, have we chosen our subconscious, our programming? Because a lot of things happen behind the scenes in our subconscious that we aren't even aware of. So if you have any questions, let me know. Do me a favor, subscribe to my YouTube channel. One of the things that I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to help more people. My one-on-one schedule is smaller than it's ever been, and I don't know I'll ever go back to a lot of one-on-one coaching. It's just not the life that I choose to have, or the flexibility that I choose to have yet. Here's what I'm really interested in. I spent 2 hours with a friend, a colleague, and we talked about his game plan, and we talked about his math, and through asking questions, what we realized was his math wasn't wrong. However, with a few adjustments, we could go from addition to multiplication with a lot easier path. That's where I'm getting a lot of energy right now. So if you'd like a business tune-up, if you'd like for me to ask you questions and dive deep on what your game plan is, push on some pain points, we move pretty fast. So if you're super sensitive and you're not open to looking at things differently, I can tell you this: I don't need to be right on your game plan. I've just gone through enough people's scenarios where I can usually read the bottle on what you're saying and what you're not saying, and triangulate the information of how you're showing up to me, to other people, and then looking at the math equation of what you're saying, what you're doing, and what that's going to equate to, and to try to tell you how I formulate and how I make my educated guesses. I'd be kidding you if I could tell you to do that. Here's what I know. Over the last 10 years, I've coached thousands of real estate agents. I've been fortunate enough to have thousands and thousands of hours of real conversations, and then I get feedback. And when I get that feedback, I get to triangulate, and I get evidence, and you almost get like this sixth sense, where you can pick up on things, because I've been very purposeful on the path that we've been doing. So if you're interested in something like that, I'd love to have that conversation with you. So I also believe in sustainability, and some of you might be asking, well, Hank, what's in it for you? And I do believe in sustainability. I do believe that things need to have some sort of filter. So maybe you've been thinking about EXP. I'd love to have a conversation with you. I always want to honor, if you've been in conversation with someone, I always want to honor those relationships. Yet if you haven't made a decision, if you haven't decided that EXP is it, give me an opportunity. I might be able to help you see it through a different lens. Again, I'm not saying don't go through someone else, but I've had people that I've talked to for 2 years. Somebody else presented it from a different light, and I'm always going to be doing the honorable thing. But if this interests you and it inspires you, let's have a conversation about EXP. Let me help you make that decision, where I can tell you, going through this and having revenue share has made everything way easier. Having multiple streams of revenue has made things easier. So let's have a conversation. All right. I'm going to go swimming. This was very long. If you did listen to this, do me a favor, leave some comments in the YouTube page. My goal is on my birthday, we'll have 1,000 subscribers. I've been doing the math. I believe that we can get there. So do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. Talk to you later.